Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Starfinder 2nd Edition. Panting and the sounds of boots on a metal floor compete for auditory supremacy. A small platoon of combatants dashes through the hallway after hallway, hunted by a veritable sea of multi-limbed horrors. A frustrated grunt can be heard over the commotion as a set of boots halts. A stocky, heavily armored combatant wielding an energy-powered Gatling gun turns to face the oncoming horde. One team member stops the rest in their tracks. He attempts to reason with the burly, stoic soldier before quickly realizing the decision has already been made. With gratitude, the others continue on, flying around the next bend. With loaded and primed weapon at the ready, purple flesh flows en masse around the next corner, moving toward him at an incredible speed. With a quick chuckle, the determined hero lets loose a seemingly endless stream of plasma. Chunks of viscera are torn from the flesh of oncoming horrors, slowing their advance ever so slightly. Realizing the weapon is nearly depleted, the lone soldier, understanding his fate all too well, drops his charged companion to the floor, retrieving a pair of grenades. Pins hit the floor as a wave of teeth, claws, and slime washes over him before he is consumed by a firestorm, which cleans up the majority of life in the hallway. Welcome back, adventurers. Today we start on a little bit of a different adventure as we get to my very first Starfinder 2nd Edition video. I know thus far I've been focused on Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and that is, generally speaking, my focus, but I think considering both games are built on the same system, because they truly are, really the same system. I mean, this is just adding on to Pathfinder more than it is anything else. Because of that, I'm going to cover both games. I am the type of GM that would allow somebody to play a Starfinder character in a Pathfinder game, or vice versa, honestly. And we just have to make slight adjustments to make sure it would work out and make sense within the context of the campaign, but I'm all for that sort of thing. So I've already been diving in here, and I wanted to go ahead and start off with a class guide because we've got 6 class guides to do, and of course we have their ranking videos to go along with them. That's already a lot to cover, plus anything we do with weapons, armor, new systems, new keywords, whatever it may be. A lot of videos probably going to come down the pipe here. Not going to take my once a week Wednesday noon time for my regular videos. Those will still happen. And I'm not even sure I'm done with Battlecry yet. I might still do another Battlecry video as well. But for now, I want to go ahead and kick this off. And we are starting with the Soldier class. Soldiers are your giant weapon-wielding action heroes, right? They're laying down just streams of bullets or firing off rocket launchers and, using big two-handed weapons to take chunks out of multiple enemies at once. These are your area attacking, auto-firing teammates. When you're a soldier, you're here to do one thing: fill the area with enough bullets and laser blasts to make sure that nothing's going to walk away. Soldiers are martial characters, using Constitution as a primary ability score, which makes them fall into the near martial category for the way I look at things normally. So this would follow into what I have called near martials, but it is a martial character. They get 10 hit points per level. They are proficient in simple and martial weapons, and then all armors by default. This means they're going to have solid offensive and defensive capabilities just out the gate. You're also expert in fortitude and will saves, but you only get trained in perception and reflex saves. Because your base ability score is Constitution, which is unique in Starfinder 2nd Edition, there's no other class that has that, although considering we only have 6 classes right now, they're all fairly unique in their primary ability scores. You are going to have solid hit points. You're just going to have good hit points. You've got your 10 base plus 4 for your con. You're getting a lot every level. Your fortitude saves are also going to be really, really strong. Not only do you have good fortitude saves anyway, plus high con, plus your fortitude saves are actually going to get all the way up to legendary on this character. You're going to have good fort saves. And finally, there are no skills directly associated with Constitution, but there are some features here we'll get to that kind of deal with that. So don't worry too much. The soldier actually has 4 key level 1 features, and then several important terms we have to discuss those features at all. And then, of course, we have at least one higher level feature as well. So what is our first feature? Well, the first feature is called Suppressing Fire, and I'm going to have to explain a few terms here. So, what is Suppressing Fire? When you attack with an area trait weapon, or an area trait based attack, then creatures in the area that get attacked will have to make a save against your attack, which they always have to do anyway, but if they fail the save, then they're going to become suppressed. This means that they're going to have a -1 circumstance penalty to attack rolls and a -10-foot status movement speed. So they're going to get slower by 10 feet, and they're going to have a minus to their attack rolls, but they're different types of circumstance versus status. This lasts until the start of your next turn. That all sounds really cool, but there's some stuff in there that probably didn't make any sense because I have to explain it. So what do we mean by area weapons or area attacks? Well, we have a few new types of weapons. In fact, we have two we need to talk about, which are the weapons with the area trait and weapons with the automatic trait. Weapons with the area trait will also have that listed on their weapon readout. It's going to be specific. So if it would say area cone, for instance, or area burst 10 feet. These are the types of things you might find in the listing for the traits of the weapon. When you attack with an area weapon, you can only do so by using the area fire 2-action activity. This uses the area type listed, so area cone, for instance. The distance for a cone or line is the range increment of the weapon, so you can read that on its weapon block. For burst, you're going to have to center the burst at a corner between squares as you normally do with a burst, but you need to center it in such a way that the center is within the first range increment of your weapon. All creatures in the area are going to make a basic reflex save against your class DC plus your tracking value. Really quickly, tracking value is like potency rune value, so tracking goes up 1, 2, 3. Same style as potency runes, just has a different name. Any creature that fails takes damage equal to the weapon damage listed. So if it's a D10 weapon, you're level 1, they're going to take a D10 damage from the strike. And of course, you had any bonuses on there, that would also count. So when they fail, they take a normal strike's worth of damage, basically. On a crit fail, they're going to take double damage as always, and they're going to take the critical specialization effect for the weapon. So even though you're not striking with it, it's using the strike effects, basically. Weapons have an expend value now, which, because they're loaded up, you're not having to reload them necessarily every time you shoot. They have an expend value. This is how much ammunition is expended when you normally fire them. With an area weapon, you're going to expend the amount that it says every time you use area fire. So if it says expend 2, you'll use 2 of, let's say, 10 ammo that gets loaded in. That's what gets used up. Fantastic. On screen, I've been putting a few area weapons to show examples of what they might look like in their stat block. How about automatic weapons? So these are a little bit different. You can fire a normal strike with an automatic weapon. So, like anything else, single action, you strike with it, you target one enemy, great. You can do that with an automatic weapon. However, you can also use the auto fire 2-action activity. This is always a cone, and the length of the cone is half the range increment of the weapon. This deals damage the same way that area fire does, right? So on a fail, they're going to take normal damage. On a crit fail, double plus critical specialization. However, expending ammo here. When you use auto fire, you're going to expend 2 times whatever the expend value is in the stat block for every creature that's caught in the area. So you could wipe through a lot of ammo doing this. And here's a few examples of automatic weapons. Something to keep in mind is, pay attention to the range increment, because remember, it's only half that when you're actually going to decide what that cone looks like. Okay, so now that we've covered that, we've covered suppressing fire and talked about how to set up these areas to make suppressing fire happen, let's talk about the other features, starting with primary target. When you make an area attack using area fire or auto fire, you're going to make a strike as a free action. However, this strike isn't meant to do damage. You're going to make this strike against the nearest creature to you, if you're doing a cone, or the creature closest to the center of your burst, if it's a burst. If you hit with this free action strike that you do, again, you're not doing damage with it, but assuming you hit, then if the creature were to succeed against the area reflex save, they're going to fail instead. So you're going to be able to turn that one target's success into a failure if that happens. this doesn't count against your multiple attack penalty. So this is just, basically this is saying one target, you can turn their success into a failure, but it has to meet these criteria. So that's definitely going to help creatures fail against your actions here. But what about the other features? Well, we have Walking Armory. This is pretty critical, I think, to the setup, because I'm sure you noticed, but we're a con-based class that wants to use ranged weapons, which use dexterity, yet we are supposed to use heavy armor, which requires strength. Well, this makes it so that you can actually use your con modifier rather than your strength modifier for armor requirements, which is huge. This also reduces the bulk of armor by 1 if you meet the strength requirements. You can make armor easier for yourself to carry, and this increases the total bulk you can carry equal to your con mod, and the amount of bulk before you become over encumbered by half your con mod. So con is really playing a lot of roles, and this, we aren't even done with it yet, but a lot of roles for you. Next up, we have the final feature, which is the soldier fighting style. This is your subclass, and we will get into those after we talk about the other features, because I want to talk about what's available to all of them. So what other features do we have? Well, we have Fearsome Bulwark at level 3. This says that you can use your con modifier instead of charisma modifier to coerce and demoralize. You can also use your con mod instead of strength for reposition and shove. Now this still uses your proficiency with the associated skills, so you still need to be whatever, trained, expert, master, what have you, with those skills to gain those bonuses, but you're using your con mod in more ways. So starting at level 3, your con is doing just a ton for you. So that's all the unique features. Obviously there's plenty of other features that you gain as you, get better proficiency and saves and all that, like normal. I do want to call out though, that before you hit 20th level, you are going to become legendary in fortitude saves, in all armors, and in your class DC. So you're used to seeing marshals not get great class DCs. Not the case here. You're going to have high class DC. Now that we got through all the features, let's go ahead and talk about those subclasses. As I said, there are going to be 5, and it's not easy to pin down exactly, what you're going to get from them compared to each other. So I'm just going to say they're going to get unique things about them that alter the features you already have. Starting off with Action Hero. You are the master of automatic weapons. When using an automatic weapon, if you normally strike with the weapon and you hit them, they're going to become suppressed. So great, you don't have to area to suppress a target. If you've got one target, you can just make strikes and suppress. When you use auto fire, the length isn't half the distance of your range increment. Now the cone length is the entire range increment, which makes it a much, much larger cone, right? Because doubling the distance doesn't double the size of the cone. It's much larger than that. You can also choose any creature in the cone as your primary target, not just the closest to you. So normally you might have, one creature up close and then 3 further away. You might want one of them to be your primary target. You can do that as the Action Hero. Armor Storm. This is an up close and personal style of fighting. You don't count as being in the area of any of your area attacks, even if you are in fact standing in that area. So a burst right under you, for instance. You get half your level, minimum 1. Resistance to damage from suppressed enemies. So even if they do hit you, they're doing less damage to you. You don't need a free hand to grapple, shove, trip, reposition, or disarm. You also get a +1 status bonus to those checks if you're doing it against a suppressed target. And if you succeed at one of those against any target, that target will become suppressed until the start of your next turn, just because you tripped, shoved, disarmed, repositioned, or grappled them. So a lot of athletic stuff going on here with Armor Storm. Next we have the Bombard. Go boom. That's the whole thing here. You can exclude any number of allies from your area attacks equal to half your con mod. So right away you're going to get to exclude 2 allies from the area, which probably is all you're going to need, but if nothing else, at least it's going to help some of them. Also, creatures that succeed but don't critically succeed against your area attacks are still suppressed. So you won't do damage if they succeed, but you still suppress them. So you are still controlling the battlefield even if they succeed. Next up is Close Quarters. This is a melee style. You use two-handed melee weapons. If you use two-handed melee weapons, then you qualify for any soldier feat or feature that normally requires an area attack weapon. When using a soldier feat, be careful of that, when using a soldier feat, your weapon gains the area burst 5 feet trait. Your melee weapon gains that. You can't hurt yourself when using your weapon, like this, so don't worry about that. When using this, your primary target or any soldier features that require range normally will work with two-handed melee weapons instead. So you don't have to worry about the fact that it says you have to have a ranged area weapon. No, you're fine. You can use it with this. Finally, you gain the level 1 Whirling Swipe Soldier feat, which we will get to in a little bit, but you get it for free just by taking the subclass. Our final subclass is Erudite Warrior. This is a mind over matter kind of situation. You gain trained in diplomacy or society, and you get a lore of your choice. These go up to Expert, Master, and Legendary on their own when your armor does, which is at levels 7, 13, and 17. So free raising of skills, which is never bad. You gain a new action as well called Oppressive Presence. This is one action and you can use it once per round. You choose one creature within 60 feet and it just gains the suppressed condition until the start of your next turn. No save, nothing. It's just suppressed. If that creature targets you with something, however, with some offensive ability of theirs, it loses the suppressed condition. So if you can target something that's going after an ally, that's where it's going to help the most. And hopefully that gives you an idea of the range of playstyles available to the soldier. Let's go ahead and dive into the level 1 feats, and we'll talk about a few higher level ones as well to give you an idea of what's coming the way of the soldier. Starting off with Burst of Strength. This is level 1. This is a reaction. It is once per hour. If you would fail a check to shove, grapple, disarm, trip, or reposition a creature, you get to re-roll the check, taking the new result no matter what it is. But at least it's a way to re-roll any failures you might have with your athletics checks. Pretty critical for at least one of the builds that we talked about. Next is Pin Down. This is level 1 and a reaction. Okay, we're into the reactions. If a creature succeeds against your area fire or auto fire, you can force one creature with this to make a will save against your class DC, becoming suppressed on a fail. So you can still suppress them even if they would succeed. And this is just a reaction with no limit, so you can do it every round. Quick Swap. This is level 1. It's a reaction. That's 3 reactions in a row. If you're holding a two-hand weapon and an enemy moves adjacent to you, you can use this reaction to swap to a different two-hand weapon. If you have 2 sets of arms, you can use the swap hands action here instead. So pretty much you had a giant two-handed ranged weapon out, you can swap to a two-handed melee weapon. It's probably the idea. Although you can do whatever you want as long as they're two-handed weapons. Ready Reload. This is level 1, one action. Your last action must have been to expend ammo from a ranged weapon that takes at least 2 actions to reload, which is pretty much the type of things you're going to be using, for this class. This lets you reduce the number of actions required to reload by 1. Then you interact to reload. This removes the requirement of having a free hand in order to reload. So I need some help here from the comments. Please jump in because I think I'm confused. When I went and looked at the section about reloading in this book, it said that the actions required to take a hand off, meaning to make it free, and then to put it back on the weapon, right, to be ready to use it again, was included in the cost of the reloads listed. So if it says reload 2, the assumption is you can make that hand free, reload it, and put it back on, all as part of that 2 actions. Which brings me to my question here of what does this actually do? If I had a reload 2, and this takes away one of the actions to reload, great, now it's reload 1, but I still have to use an action to do this, so I've saved an action to spend an action. I just feel like it doesn't do anything. I mean, perhaps I can split things up better, so I'm not really sure. Honestly, I could use some help figuring out what this actually does, because I feel like my reading of this is it does nothing. Please help me. Anyway, Whirling Swipe. This is level 1, as we've been talking about, 2 actions. You have to be holding a two-handed melee weapon for this one. Your weapon gains the area burst 5 feet, so you don't have to have that subclass to get this, right? This could be any subclass. And it gains the unwieldy traits for this turn only. If your weapon has reach, then the burst is equal to the reach of the weapon. So if it's a normal reach weapon, it'll have a burst 10 feet instead. You then use area fire using one of the corners of your square, or the large square, whatever, one of the corners you have as the origin for the burst. You don't take damage when you do this. If your weapon has backswing or forceful, then you're going to gain a +1 to the save DC that they have to roll against for their save. And your primary target feature then targets one of the melee enemies that you've got next to you. So let's talk about a few higher level ones. First, we've got Shoving Shot. This is level 4, takes 2 actions. You area fire or auto fire and force your primary target to make a fortitude save against your class DC. On a fail, it is pushed 10 feet away, either from you, if it's a cone or a line, or from the center of the burst, if it was a burst. On a crit fail, this is 15 feet pushed away. So keep in mind that you might be suppressing and pushing, which means they've got a lot of work to gain any ground. Anchoring Impacts, level 10. When you suppress a creature using one of your attacks, so either an area attack or a single attack if it's an automatic weapon, or a melee strike or something like that, but it has to be one that allows suppression as part of it, so keep in mind all the ways to do suppression. Then the suppression you give is a -20-foot penalty to speeds instead of a -10-foot penalty to speeds. And if they critically fail against your area attack, or you critically succeed with the attack that can suppress them, they're also going to be stunned 1 next round. So you're taking all sorts of things from them, and this is just passive to what you already want to do. It's just a passive upgrade that's really strong. And finally, Run, Cowards! Level 14. Creatures that critically fail saves against your area fire and auto fire are also fleeing for 1 round. That's gross. They're just gonna run away while they're suppressed, and then you can just clean them up. Having gone through those feats, let's go ahead and jump into my class breakdown graph. Soldiers have a solid selection of playstyles to start off, but what hurts their tactical options is their reliance on 2 action activities, namely area fire and auto fire. Where spellcasters have a similar restriction, often relying on 2 action activities, the variety of spells on offer is incredible and gives them a lot of versatility. Due to the reliance on weapons, you're going to probably only have 1 main weapon that you use, possibly 2, but most soldiers won't have quite as many options, which is why I'm only giving this a 2, but don't worry, what they are good at, they are very, very good at. Single target damage is usually where martials really excel. However, this is a unique situation where that's not really the case. In fact, you don't have a ton of features with soldiers that really do a lot for single target attacks. Most of yours are AoE based. If you have an area trait weapon, you won't even be able to make single targeted strikes, so that's just gone entirely. Having said that, there are still options for use with automatic weapons or 2-handed melee weapons, and you are a martial class, you're going to get solid use of martial weapons and attacks. You can do good damage. So you're still going to go up with your weapons, you're still going to have all that available to you, which is why this is a 2 and not a 1, but this really isn't your single target damage class. AoE damage, however, now we're talking. If there was an AoE damage the class, this is kind of it. Everything is built around it. The damage you are capable of, assuming you can set it up correctly, will be solid round after round. This is a 5, mostly because you get far more from it than any other class would using the same weapons. There are no spell slots to worry about, no cooldowns, it's just fire, fire, fire until you have to reload occasionally and fire, fire, fire. Support isn't really their strong suit, however, but they do have some nice feats that do support your allies. Things like taking damage for them, providing cover for them, or even improving their saves. So while it's not their strong suit, it's serviceable, and I'm giving them a solid 3 because you can definitely support your allies. Jumping back to their strengths, I talked about AoE damage being their thing, but this is the other thing you could kind of argue is their whole focus, and that's control. Even their base attacks are providing battlefield control with reduced movement and attack penalties. But then there are plenty of ways to reduce movement further, to frighten, stun, conceal, all sorts of crazy things. Move them around the battlefield. You can control the battlefield in ways that only casters normally can. There are so many ways to disable your enemies, and here are plenty that simply apply passive upgrades to your strikes that we already talked about, where you're getting some of this extra boost to control. Now, I was back and forth between giving this a 4 and a 5, and I'm going with a 4, but that's only because spellcasters are so good at inflicting a much wider range of debuffs and types of control. But don't kid yourself, you are an amazing tool for battlefield control. In the end, this is a 4. And finally, we have survivability. With a solid 10 hit points per level, Con as a primary ability score, plus you're going to get up to legendary with heavy armor. You're going to get legendary with fortitude saves. Yes, you won't be using a shield, but everything you have just more than makes up for it. This is an extremely strong point for the class, and you can be up in melee even with your guns because of this. This is a 5 for sure. They are very survivable. Soldier builds will mostly live between two general setups. Either a strength build, where you're planning on getting into the fray with a two-handed weapon, or a dex build for the majority of your ranged setups. I'm not recommending any mental builds here, although you could definitely do it because of the way that you've got save DCs for a lot of things going on here, but it will affect your ability to use automatic weapons if you're not using dex, or melee weapons with strength. So what do those two builds look like? Well, as you can see on screen here, you've got the general ranged builds, where con is obviously always your primary ability score. You're going to want to max that out. And then dexterity. Now, again, because of the way auto fire works and area fire works, you don't need to worry about this as much. But if you are using an automatic weapon, you're going to want dex plenty high so you can make individual strikes as well. Then strength and charisma. You can still do a lot of things with athletics, although you can use a con for that some of the time. Sometimes you're going to want strength. And charisma is, I think, just a good mental choice. I think any of the mental ones can be swapped in here just as easily. And then if you're going with a two-handed melee build, it's con and strength. You're going to need strength for those attack rolls. Then charisma, whiz, and dex. You really don't need dexterity here at all, so it's really just, what do you want your mental stats to be boosted up? You could easily swap an int for one of the other two here. It's not really a big deal. There are several subclasses I believe are fairly simple to play, and the features I don't think are very hard to understand once you've gotten a chance to see them in play, but I'm going to go with what I think is one of the simplest to play, and that is the Bombard. Why is this simple? Well, the only way you're adjusting your kind of base features here is by excluding allies from getting hurt by them, which is great for new players, and making sure that you can still suppress enemies even though they succeed against you, feeling like you're still accomplishing something even if they succeed on their save against you. So all of that means I really like this for new players. As far as the rest of that build, I would choose something like Stellar Cannon. This does an area burst, so you can target where you want and make a smaller burst. There's plenty of good options, I think, so don't worry about the cannon if you want to go with a cone or a line-based weapon. If you have the money to add it, you could always add an upgrade of an under-mounted grenade launcher, but you probably won't have the money for that, so don't worry about that, and it adds more complexity. So if you want to stick with base, something like Stellar Cannon's good. The other weapon I would grab is the Doshko, and we'll talk about why I'm taking that. It's a two-handed melee weapon, so it's just if creatures happen to get it close and you don't want to use your cannon anymore. As far as armor, I think the Freebooter armor here, which is a medium armor that gives you +4 at the gate and +1 from dex, is a solid way to start here. As far as the stats, I would go with a +4 in con, +3 in strength, and I'll explain why that, with a +1 in dex and +1 in charisma. The dex will help you even out your armor to max it out, and the strength is because we took that melee weapon and we're going to take quick swap. This is a level 1 feat that we talked about in case creatures come up close. You can use the reaction to swap weapons, so you're ranged until they're up close, then you go melee, and because of high strength you can still strike them down with your melee weapon, but we chose an area gun, not an automatic, so we don't actually need the dexterity because we're not going to make single strikes. And now that we've talked about that build, let's see what some soldier gameplay looks like. Gorgon has been alerted that constructs have begun to malfunction in the vault section of the station and has come to sort out the issue. Upon entering the control room, he finds more than a few clockwork creatures malfunctioning, and they appear hostile. They turn focus towards our gun-toting soldier, and the intent is clear. They roll initiative. One of the constructs manages to take the lead, and with sparks illuminating the metal floor below it, it rushes forward. It strides twice and fires a nail gun at Gorgon, which misses, but catches his attention well enough. Gorgon is up next, and with a small amount of repositioning, he sets up and uses 2 actions to area fire. He fires a high-powered round from his cannon in a 10-foot burst within 50 feet. He's able to get 3 of the 4 creatures in the area. The creature closest to the center of the burst is his primary target, so he is going to take a shot, and he actually misses with that free shot he got, so it won't turn a success into a failure. But the round explodes and all 3 make saves. 1 critically fails and takes 1d10, in this case 7, doubled, for a total of 14 damage, and it explodes in a burst of electricity. The primary target fails its save, so great, takes 7 damage anyway, piercing damage from this weapon, and manages to keep going, but it is suppressed. The third succeeds at its save, taking no damage, but thanks to being a bombard, the creature is still suppressed. The final construct then uses 2 actions to rush into melee, preparing an attack. Once in melee range, Gorgon uses Quick Swap to stow his cannon and equip his 2-handed axe. The construct then attacks, striking with electricity and hitting Gorgon for 4 damage. The other 2 that are still around, both suppressed, would require 3 actions to get in melee range. Instead, they each reposition for a single action before firing piercing shots to each. One misses by only a single point, which we should remember that suppressed reduced the attack by -1, and in the end only 1 of 4 attacks lands, dealing 3 total piercing damage. Hurt, but not terribly, Gorgon strikes the nearby creature with the axe. This doesn't have a maximum chance to hit for the level. Keep in mind you only have a +3 to strength, but still lands it, dealing a total of 11 damage. This is a 1d8 +3 for a total of 11, which disables the creature. He then moves to gain distance and puts away his 2-handed weapon, pulling nothing out at the time because he doesn't have the actions for it. This encourages both remaining constructs to move in, though keeping their distance, before firing another 2 shots each, this time landing 2 of them, and for a total of 9 damage. This takes our hero down to only 6 hit points remaining. Feeling slightly cornered, Gorgon pulls out his cannon once more and uses area fire. He chooses the sturdier of the 2 as the primary target and hits with the free attack he gets against the primary target. Now, the primary target does succeed its reflex save against area fire, but thanks to being the primary target and getting struck, it fails instead. This time, Gorgon rolls a full 10 on the d10, and both take the entire amount before sparking and becoming disabled. With the threat dealt with, Gorgon begins to sweep up the scrap lying about the room. If you're playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition classes and archetypes along with your Starfinder content, I would suggest taking a look at a Guardian multi-class archetype if you're going to play a melee build. I like this because, one, it would fit with the strength and con requirements really well, but on top of that, soldiers do have a bit of a struggle with their action economy. They're going to be using 2 actions a lot of rounds on area fire or auto fire, so you're looking for something to do with a single action. The Guardian here, and why I like it so much, is it has taunt as a feature, so you can taunt one enemy while suppressing a whole other group of enemies and have even more control over the battlefield, which is really helpful. Now, you do have really high con, so you might think, okay, high con matches up with Kineticists, which is another con-based class. I'd be wary of something like that just because Kineticists are already action-starved, so doing 2 action-starved classes together, I don't recommend. So I would say be a little wary of that. Now, if you're sticking with Starfinder 2nd Edition only, I actually really like the Operative, but specifically if you're going to use an automatic weapon. So with the Operative, to gain the most out of that multi-class archetype, you have to be able to target a single enemy with a strike, and you can't do that with area fire weapons. So keep that in mind. I think it could be a really cool combo. Just some ideas of how to combo up what you have available with your class with some archetypes. And that's it. We have finished the soldier, and that means our next video will be about ranking the soldier subclasses, all 5 of them against each other, keeping in mind what they can gain from the different feats of the class and the features that are available. What do you think? Does the soldier look exciting to you? Is this the class you were most looking forward to, or were you thinking it was just going to be the Starfinder version of the fighter? Hopefully you can see that's not the case. Hopefully then you want to go and check out new ways to build a character in Starfinder 2nd Edition. And as always, adventure on!